Good morning, everyone. Last year, the Communications Committee asked the community coffee folks, would you like to know more about how your CSA operates? And very strongly, we got about 100% of the hands went up in the air. So this is the second day of our attempt to educate, inform, and explain how the organization CSA actually works. Bottom line is that most everything that comes before the board comes through our committee system. We look at issues, we look at suggestions, we look at ideas, we vet them, we analyze them, and then we determine from the committees whether or not they need to go to the board for approval. So the foundation of CSA begins with our committees. If you haven't heard or if you haven't seen the website, we have openings right now. I have 7 to 9 openings for the Long-Range Strategic Planning Committee, which we'd like to have volunteers sign up for. If you've had some long-range strategic planning in your background, if you have been with the community, in the community, and know some of the workings of the community, that would be a great asset for us to have. I know the Maintenance MEMP Committee has 2 openings, 1 opening, I'm sorry, on MEMP. Toby and I have 2 openings on the Safety and Security Committee, which we'll talk about shortly. So if you're interested, this is where the ground level begins for CSA, with property owners committing to spend some time at the committee level. So that having been said, let me introduce David Borghese, who will begin with the Finance Committee update, and then we'll move forward to Safety and Security later when David finishes. David?
Thank you, Michael. We also have with us today Victoria Shanahan, who's our Director of Finance and Administration.
Good morning. Good morning.
Okay, this is not working as well. Okay, the committee purpose really is as any committee of any board, we don't make decisions, we make recommendations basically for the board to act upon. So we do that within the areas of finance, accounting, tax, insurance, and investments, our primary areas. A very long list, and I'm not going to go through it. I'm going to let you guys decide to read it. But basically, as I mentioned, and I would say that when it comes down to the actual workings of the committee, I would say the most intense portion of what the committee does has to do with the annual budget process, which is both the operating expenditures as well as the maintenance, enhancements, and major projects, which accounts for a very substantial portion of the annual budget each year. Victoria will get into some of the actual numbers for the 2017 budget that was approved in November by the prior CSA board. As you can see from the listing, one of the things that we also do is deal with making sure that tax returns are filed on a timely basis. The other thing we make sure of is that we do have an external audit, and our audited financial statements are available. They're printed every year. And in the annual meeting, which happens in May, a summary of the financial statements, comparisons to budget, and some explanatory footnotes are also included in the annual report. Be that as it may, the actual audited statements are also available, and those statements are, well, I'll call much more complete because it contains all of the footnotes, which runs for about 12 or 14 pages. Some of the things that we do on a meeting-by-meeting basis, and we have scheduled 6 meetings throughout the course of the calendar year. Typically, we may have an additional meeting if something comes up that needs our attention. But what we do on an annual basis is to look at our investments and our investment policy. We look at our funding policy with respect to emergency funding and capital infrastructure reserves. As you'll see in a minute, we have a fairly substantial amount of security investments in the $9 to $10 million range. And we look at that as a source of interest income to fund some of our operations, but also we look at that as being those funds that are available to replace infrastructure as infrastructure and capital additions wear out. So what do we have for infrastructure? Let's talk about that for just a second. Our infrastructure is really all those identifiable assets that are out there. So when we start talking about infrastructure, we can talk about our roads, our leisure trails, fences, signs, bridges. Then we have a number of buildings. While we rent this building, we have the internal aspect that we have to deal with as far as replacing the rugs, redecorating, replacing chairs. We have the CSA administration building. We also have a number of maintenance buildings that need to be taken care of. We have the guardhouses. When you go beyond that, we have capital equipment such as the large dump trucks, the graders, the tub grinder, which is a pretty near almost $1 million piece of equipment that's in what's called the pit. That takes all of the vegetative debris, grinds it up into mulch. We also have all of the patrol cars for security. We have administrative cars for people to get around, such as the car that Brett Martin uses to travel throughout the plantation to see what's going on. So these are the infrastructure things that we have. One of the things that was always an issue to us is, what about the stuff we can't see? What about the storm water and drainage system throughout our plantation? And we recently had done for us a engineering study of the capabilities and what I'll call the lifespan of that system. And I think the result of that will be presented at our next coffee. So I'm not going to get into it because I'm pretty new to understanding what it's all about. But it's a significant issue for our community. As I mentioned, we look annually at our insurance program that's really administered by Victoria and the rest of her staff. And we also recently, as a matter of fact, since we get most of our cash through assessments that happen at the end of December, generally through the mid to end of January. We recently invested approximately $4 million of those receipts in fixed income securities that will mature over 2017 and a little bit later on. And we'll get into some of the specifics when you see some of the numbers that'll be up. But we've already done that. We've done it in order to basically ratchet out the investments over 2017 so that they will mature and come due as we need the money to pay our operating expenses. So we're in a position where we collect the majority of our receipts very early on, and then we spend money throughout the entirety of the year. And so that's what we need to keep track of. Our current committee is made up of a number of board members, but also up to a limit of 9 non-board members that are residential property owners. And that's basically the makeup of the committee. Obviously, we are interested in anybody who would like to volunteer. We have a couple of openings to get to the 9. I think we currently have 7. Oop, hit the wrong button. And the 2016 committee members are shown. Rob Marsack has served his term limits, and term limits are 2 terms of 3 years each, so 6 years. He's served 6 consecutive years. He'll be coming off. Jack McHenry will be joining the board in 2017. So when you look up at the list, Marianne, John, Lisa, Lee, and Ray are the residential property owners that are not board members. you always have to have limitations. Basically, those limitations are not limitations that are put on by the committee itself or by the board. They're really state statutes that basically limit what a committee can do as opposed to what's the responsibility of the board. And now, for the good part of the presentation.
Okay, what do I?
This one right there, this, the one that
Okay.
advances it.
Good morning. I don't know everybody, but I know a lot of you, so that's good. Good morning. I'm going to make the color, I'm going to change the color to green because we like green because it's money, right? I just want to tell you a little bit about my department and how we fit in with the organization as the whole. You'll see at the top, we all answer, of course, to the board of directors and then the president. I report directly to Brett. Here's my staff there, and
There's a
oh, thank you. Thank you. There's my staff. I have a senior accountant. I have a finance assistant. I also, information technology also reports to me, as well as human resources reports to me. So that's kind of how we fit in with the whole picture. I'm not going to read this to you. I'm happy to hand it out if you would like to have it for your reading pleasure. Basically, we are responsible. We have a fiduciary responsibility to take care of the funds and the risk management of CSA. We have financial, budgetary, treasury, accounting, and income tax preparation is what we handle. Here's the 17 budget that Mr. Borghese referred to. I tried to make it as kind of simple as possible. Excuse me. I broke it out into residential assessments. Other property owners is our commercial assessments. There's your gate entry and permit fees, and other operating revenues is cell tower rental, some money that we get from our related entities, Six Oaks, the Forest Preserve. And then we track our expenditures by department. We track it by maintenance, safety and security, trolley operations, general administration. General administration is myself, Brett, Amanda, David Henderson, and then facilities is this building, Tower Beach, the administration building. That's what facilities is. So there's our income, our projected income from operations right there. Then we have depreciation, and there's your major replacements right there. Those are if we're going to repave a road, if we're going to replace a bridge, if we're going to get a new car, a new tub grinder, something. That's what goes into that number. This year, unfortunately, we don't have enough funds from the operating revenue and expenditures to fund this, so that's why we're budgeted for a deficit for 2017. As far as cash flow, where's our cash going? There's our budgeted deficit. You add back depreciation because that's not a cash. Add back amortization. This is our amortization on bond premium, which is a crazy way we have to account for bond amortization. Capital expenditures, so we look like we're going to go in the $722,000. I just put together this little graph to kind of show you where the money's coming from. And I did a pie chart. You'll see that the residential assessments is only 55% of the total. The other big one here is your gate pass revenue. Mm-hmm. Right there, whoops, right there in that short-term rental. That's that $15 per car per week. Is that what you're referring to, Dana? Yep. Yes, they pay, like I said, they pay $15 per car per week when they're renting on a short-term basis. Your annual permits is your contractors that are coming in and they're buying annual decals. That's where that's what annual permit is. That's your commercial assessments right there. Yes. Sea Pines Resort, Sea Pines Center, South Beach, that's where all that comes in. Harbor Town. Okay, any more questions on this slide? Yeah. When you rent a bicycle, for when you're here on vacation, you rent a bicycle for a week. Inside Sea Pines.
Okay, gotcha.
There's not enough of us for that.
We are filming, so because we're recording, I do ask that you use a microphone because otherwise your voice won't be picked up on the actual video. So I apologize. Yeah, so any other questions, please use a microphone in the future.
If you rent a bicycle and you're here for the week and you rent from a company outside of Sea Pines, they pay $1 per bike to bring those bikes into our plantation. That's what that is. If you are coming here for a week on vacation and you have a bike on the back of your car, you'll pay an additional $1 at the gate. Yep. That is in that number. So there's kind of two parts to the bike fee.
Just a second, please.
Well, we're on the gas passes situation. I know that the contractors buy a yearly pass so they can come in. I was asked just this week, I'm in real estate again, I was asked just this week that if you live, say, like in another plantation, if that person could buy a yearly pass.
Yes, they can.
So that they can come into Harbortown and go to the restaurants and et cetera, et cetera. And I was thinking they could. I told them yes, but I would verify.
They can. It's $50 per year.
$50 per year.
Yes.
But that entitles them just to come in and use the facilities, but definitely not use the beach club. They cannot use the beach club.
That's correct. They cannot use the Tower Beach Club, no.
Okay, thank you.
Any others before I move on? Okay? Now where the money goes. As I explained earlier, we track it by department. Use your administration, your plantation maintenance, security, Toby, there's our trolley operations, the little facilities, which is not too much, and then you have your major projects and replacements.
Although I've never been pulled over, if I should get pulled over.
We can
and get a
arrange for
ticket-
that,
Oh, thank you. Well, it's been close a few times. But is there a fine involved in that?
Yes, our officers, and Toby,
Toby can probably-
help me if I mess up. Yes, our officers have full SLED authority, so if you will get a speeding ticket and you will have to go to the town of Hilton Head and pay it.
So it goes to the town of Hilton Head?
Yes, we do not receive any money here for that.
Well,
No.
that's a bummer.
I know,
Okay.
I know.
Thank you.
But yes, it's a true,
Toby, is it the county or
county.
the town? Okay.
no.
So are any of the major projects, replacements, or maintenance related to the hurricane at all?
No, that
Okay.
is absolutely not included in that amount.
Okay, thank you.
Ready? Oh, that's okay.
When you noted that there was a deficit this year of $700,000 or something like that.
That was the cash use,
Yeah.
yes.
Is that as bad as it looks, or is that as sort of set off by depreciation, which is not a cash expenditure?
Right, you see, I added back,
Yeah.
whoops. I added back the depreciation because that's a non-cash item. Mhm. Now, understand that,
Let me address that.
Yes,
Okay.
that,
Okay. This is actually the second year where we've budgeted a deficit for cash. In other words, we're going to be using the reserves that we have accumulated over the years to pay for necessary repairs and replacements. We actually, because of certain operational procedures in 2016, we're pretty much at a cash break even. I think we had some revenue over expenses, but all in all, it wasn't a big issue. The reason you have reserves is to handle years like this, where we need to replace a bridge at $617,000 that wasn't in anybody's budget in the past. And that's what's really driving this today. A number of the replacements that were scheduled for 2017 have been pushed to 2018, 2019. So we've done a 5-year plan on MEMP to see what's going to happen over the course of time to our reserve funds. And we've done a major capital reserve replacement study that was completed just this past year, and we are using that in order to estimate, actually we're going to estimate where we would be 7 years from now to determine whether or not our reserves are sufficient. Okay? We're in the process of developing a reserve policy that says we have to have X percentage of reserves at the end of every looking forward 7 years based upon what we intend to expend basically in the major repairs and replacements. Over 7 years, we're estimating 7 years worth of operating expenses and revenues. And we're going to look to see at the end of that period of time what our investment balances are going to be in order to fund all future repairs. In other words, how fully funded would we be at that point in time? And the Finance Committee has looked at that, is making a recommendation, will make a recommendation to the board on a specific policy. The one catch is that while the Finance Committee has seen it, the rest of the board hasn't seen the study yet. And we need to, we as the Finance Committee need to educate the board on what we did, how we did it, and what the ramifications are. So I believe in the March meeting, we're going to have a policy for the board to consider as to what kind of funding. And it all plays into this kind of issue. In other words, we may need to spend $700,000 from reserve this year, but hopefully a couple of years down the road, we may be able to add contributions to the reserve when expenditures are scheduled to be less. So it's a balancing act. I mean, if you're in a condominium association, but you only have one major expenditure or two major expenditure over a 20-year period, you don't wait till the last year to figure out if you've got enough reserves to re-roof the house or replace all the windows or re-stucco the outside exterior and have a major. You need a reserve in order to be doing what you need to do, saving the amount of money, so when that day comes, 10 years in the future, 15 years in the future, you're making sure that you have enough money and that you don't need a, quote, special assessment from your property owners in order to put on that new roof. We're a little bit different. We have a lot of assets, $26 to $30 million of assets, and they don't all come due at 1 year. They come due over a 15 to 20 year period. So that's what the Finance Committee and administration is doing in order to evaluate where do we stand and are we doing the right kinds of things. And if we don't have the revenues, we either have to go out and figure out a way to get more revenues, or we're going to have to cut back on services. That's just the economic truth.
Question.
You need the mic.
The capital expenditures, which are replacement, correct?
Yes, these are.
Is replacement of current assets because they've come to the end of their useful life. It's not just regular day-to-day maintenance and repair. So if you are, yes, that is a negative number, but it's coming from reserves. So should you get excited about it being a negative number? In my opinion, you shouldn't, because we have reserves to replace those assets.
You would only get nervous as if this were to continue 6, 7, 8 years in a row and you run out of reserves. And that's what we're focusing on. Where will our reserve balance be relative to replacing all the assets we have out there in a business cycle, okay, it's my idea. Business cycle is about 7 years. Look 7 years down the road, you do the projections and you say, am I going to be okay or not? And every year you look another 7 years down the road. In 2020, we're going to look at 2027 and project where we might be. So this is going to be an annual task to determine. The other thing you have to understand is that the reserve study did not include any enhancements. It was only that which was already here. What we need to do is take that reserve study, and when we say, we're going to put an electronic sign at the 2 gates, and that's an $80,000 expenditure, and in 10 years I'm going to need to replace that probably at a cost of $100,000. Maybe less, who knows, electronics maybe goes down rather than being inflated. But that's the kind of thing that we are looking at. We're looking at 5 years worth of MEMP enhancements as well as what's in the, and when we're building that into reserve study. So this reserve study that we have is a living, breathing piece of data that we can work with going forward. I hope that answered your question.
Okay, I was here. Any other questions on this? No? Okay. Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about investments. As Mr. Borghese mentioned, we get in the majority of our revenues during December and January. We kind of do an analysis as to where when we're going to need cash, what we're going to need it for, and we schedule investments that will mature as the cash is needed. Obviously, our principles are preservation of capital, diversification, the maturity, liquidity, and obviously the return on investment. I did a little bar chart here to show you the ladder of our investments as they currently stand.
That's as of the end of 2016.
That's right, as of December 31st or January 1st, 2017. This is how we're scheduled to mature. So you've got a ladder here, so you don't have 1 year in which you have all your maturities. Mr. Borghese and I have really done a lot of analyzing to make sure that we're evenly matured. And I just broke this out. This is cash, these are municipal bonds, and these are fixed income securities. And we have a little bit of certificates of deposit. And again, these numbers are in thousands. Questions? I'm good? Okay.
Let me probably say something about
Sure.
the cash. At the end of 2016, having that amount of cash in our investment account with, we use Morgan Stanley as our broker, and they hold the securities for us. And they also place the purchases for us as we require them. So we're actively involved with Jonathan Dixon, who's our contact with Morgan Stanley in Atlanta. At the end of the year in December, several fixed income investments matured, which is why we had $500,000 at the end of the year in cash rather than being invested. Those funds were used to pay off a loan that we took in order to pay for the storm-related expenditures that we had incurred. We actually took down $1.5 million worth of loan funds, money, to pay contractors working here. And in January, we were able to pay $1 million back from the assessments that we received. We used that $500,000 to pay off the remainder. So we were able to liquidate in January $1.5 million worth of loans that were taken down in December and early January. And I think it worked out very well. We have an agreement with Morgan Stanley to have a very, very low interest rate borrowing funds from them as long as we use these investments as collateral. So we didn't have to sell any of our investments, and it cost us less than $3,000 worth of interest to do that. We think that there was a very wise way, a responsible way to do that. This last week, we've replaced that $500,000 of cash. We bought another $600,000 worth of fixed income securities that will mature in 2019 and 2020. So we're getting back to what I would call a normal state.
Does this investment maturity ladder also include the storm assessment?
It has nothing to do with storm at all. As a matter of fact, I will tell you that the accounting department has been under a lot of stress and strain having to deal with special assessments, questions over trees and insurance issues, extended payment terms for the special assessment and things like that. So we're a little bit behind in the backlog of understanding exactly how much we have collected in special assessments. We know precisely how much we've paid. But as far as how much we've collected in special assessments versus regular assessments, the accounting department is undergoing, as of today and yesterday, an analysis to try and figure out exactly where we are. So, to the extent and when we are in a position of having collected more money on special assessments than we may have paid out to contractors, those funds will be set aside in a separate Morgan Stanley reserve account. And so we will be handling those in an entirely separate manner. It's not going to be commingled with the regular assessments and operating expenditures.
David, don't we have a reserve account for special issues?
We have an emergency reserve account, which is available, and it was always intended to be available if there was a very major storm that would require the use of those. I mean, if you look at our emergency reserve policy, it includes use of, if we have to, number one is having the cash available to pay contractors, having the ability to borrow money, having lines of credit, having the ability to do a special assessment through board action, referendum if we needed more. So in this particular case, we believed, and the Finance Committee discussed this at length, who should bear the cost of a hurricane? And should we rebuild reserve funds for the next one, which could come next year? And it was a unanimous decision at the meeting in which the Finance Committee recommended the board initiate a special assessment for the full amount, that it should be done now. There's also another reason, because many insurance policies will allow recovery of that assessment. If we made the assessment 6 months from now, first of all, you could have new property owners that weren't even here when the hurricane hit, and then you're going to assess them for damage when they weren't even owners. We didn't believe that was appropriate. We didn't believe it was appropriate to do a little bit now and a little bit later and a little bit later and a little bit later, because after a while, you just get fatigued on that. So that's the decision that was made.
I guess I don't have a problem with tracking the information and the income, but to have more than one account for the same thing seems, duplicate.
It may
just an opinion.
That's fine.
There you go.
Money is fungible, and you can track it on pieces of paper. But sometimes there are residents who want to know how you're handling it, and are you doing it in a way that is transparent to everybody. To me, this is the most transparent way to do it. It's easily trackable. We have members of the Finance Committee who are actually doing internal audit on the expenditures to make sure that we're not commingling operational expenditures and charging it against the special assessment. So I think we're being as transparent and doing the right things for the property owners as we possibly can. Thank you.
I know your next question is going to be, how much have we spent so far? As of the end of January, we had spent a little bit over $3.2 million in recovery efforts. And the invoices continue to come in. Okay, any more questions on investments, laddering? Okay. I just wanted to go over kind of what we accomplished in 16 and also then again what I hope to accomplish in 17. As many of you know, we received, this is the big one, we received approval from the Internal Revenue Service to be recognized as a tax-exempt entity. We are known as a 501c4. And basically what it is we're kind of a quasi-government. Basically, we say to the town of Hilton Head, we'll take care of the roads, we'll take care of security on our plantation, we'll take care of the easements along the side of the roads. Town of Hilton Head, I'm taking the burden off of you. So therefore, we're recognized as a quasi-government because we are taking the burden off of the local municipality. As Mr. Borghese mentioned, we completed a comprehensive reserve study this year, and that went through every single asset that we own. It went through, there's pictures, they did an analysis of how long they thought it was going to last and where we were in that life cycle. Those guys were on property for 3 weeks. They went through everything. That hadn't been done here in over 10 years. I got here in October of 15, and it was the big consensus that, oh, we need new software, we need new software, we need new accounting software, this is horrible. Well, I sat down with a vendor from our software company and said, all right, what can this stuff do? So it was originally budgeted to have new software in the tune of $20,000, and I sat down and I said, no, this software can do a lot more than what we're utilizing it for. And then Mr. Borghese and I redesigned the monthly and the annual statements so that they are giving the users of the financial statements, your director of maintenance, your director of security, the president, the board, the finance committee, give them the information in a format that they understand. If you don't understand, accounting is not just something we do because Uncle Sam says we have to do it. It's supposed to help management do their job. And if I'm giving them financial information that they don't understand, it's useless. So we reworked all the financial statements so to give it to them in a format that's useful for them, that's helpful to have them run their own departments. I'm happy to show it to you if you're interested. And lastly, I just kind of wanted to share with you what we hope to accomplish in 2017. As you know, we also do the administration for the Six Oaks Cemetery, the Sea Pines Forest Preserve, ASPO, as well as the Sea Pines ARB. Those are completely separate entities from CSA. They are their own corporations. They have their own sets of books, their own checking accounts, their own investments. I wanted to kind of do a better analysis of the time that Amanda, that I, Bo, Toby are spending on these other entities. Is it realistic? Are they really paying their fair share? I wanted to rework the chart of accounts so it's a little bit more consistent. I wanted to give access to non-financial staff members access to our financial software, just a read-only access so they can go in there at any time and see where they are in their budget. How much money do I have left in office supplies? Where do I stand in my printing expenditures? That would be a lot easier, and it takes the burden off us too. And just a review of the financial policies. They haven't really been updated in a few years. I'd like to be able to do that. And as Mr. Borghese mentioned, we are in the process of developing a long-range reserve contribution policy. So,
That's a long title. What does that mean? Long-range reserve contribution?
oh, just like what Mr. Borghese was talking about, going out the 7 years and kind of seeing, okay, where we are and what we're going to look like in 7 years. And okay, the reserve study says we need this much money, but what if we want to buy new things? What if we want to enhance? Do we have the funds to do that?
Long-range plan with financials.
That's exactly right. It's a very fancy name.
First of all, good job. You guys did a great job. I have a question in terms of short-term rentals. Are we capturing all the short-term rental fees that we should be getting, given all the new internet opportunities that are available? Are we aware of the Airbnbs and all of those kinds of things that are taking place?
I know they have done in the past an analysis and actually gone on at Airbnb or VRBO and pointed out all the Sea Pines properties and made sure that they were paying their short-term rentals.
Okay.
It's an ongoing basis that we do to look at the internet to find out off the VRBO or the Airbnb.
Just to follow up on that, and Toby might be involved in this too. What about perceived abuse in gate fee? You know, for instance, how many homeowners, you know, are allowing contractors and stuff that are coming in that haven't paid their fees? You know, are we still tracking, you know, what kind of phone calls or abusive phone calls that are taking place in order to get gate fee passes?
Great question.
Yes, we tried to do our best to manage that program. There's always, where there's a will, there's a way. If someone's going to scam the system, they're going to do that. You have property owners, and I'm just telling you the way the program is. You have property owners that believe that they have the right to call in the pass for whoever they want to, and they shouldn't have to pay for it. Well, that's not what the current policy is. Bruce does a really good job in the Welcome Center staff. When someone pulls around there, they're making people show ID cards. You know, if you're here calling the pass, who called your pass in? Well, if they don't know who called the pass in, that's the first indicator right there. So we do a little tracking to find out, okay, where are you going? It's a pickup truck and it's full of tools. You know, where are you going? So we monitor it the best that we can. Do we still have property owners that violate the policy? Yes, we do. We are in the process of changing the top 100 property owners' passcodes and making them get new passcodes, and then we're monitoring the accounts. We have people that's had passcodes for 15 plus years. So is there abuse? Yes. But we manage it the best way that we can.
Thank you. This was really excellent, thank you. Just a question on the fixed income investments. Are the bonds that you have the money invested in, are you limited by statute or that on the risk profile of them? Can you hold junk, or are we all AAA? Thank you.
We do have an investment policy. It's not by statute, but it's an investment policy that the board, Finance Committee reviews and recommends any changes to the board on an annual basis. We have policies with respect to how much of the entire portfolio can be invested based upon the grade of the bond using Standard & Poor's rating system. And no junk. Everything has to be investment grade, and if memory serves me correct, no more than 10% can be in the B category. So everything is A or better.
Also, I think you've done a great job. I'm interested in, sorry, thank you. You mentioned earlier the ARB and Six Oaks Cemetery, and I think there was one other entity, and how CSA shoulders all the administrative and accounting work for those entities. And are those entities individually staffed at any level, and are you figuring out a way to make them pay the portion of what it is they're using in terms of manpower and assets or whatever?
They're currently paying a share. They're paying a service fee. They pay a portion of rent for the administration building. All the employees are actually employees of CSA. Then the separate entities, such as the Forest Preserve, they have a forest ranger. He's an employee of CSA, but the Forest Preserve pays his entire salary and benefits. Six Oaks Cemetery, we have a cemetery manager. He's an employee of CSA, but Six Oaks reimburses CSA for his entire salary and benefits. ARB has the two employees, Ken and Suzanne. They get a W-2 from CSA, but the ARB reimburses us for their full salary and benefits.
And are all of those entities also you're a charitable status or a tax exempt
The
status?
only one that's a 501c3 is the Forest Preserve, so you could actually donate to the Forest Preserve and take a deduction on your tax return.
You can do the same for the cemetery. It's a 501c13.
A trust.
It still can be a tax-deductible donation, but because it's not a C3, you use donor-advised funds through the community chest or Low Country Community Foundation. They cannot make a contribution to the cemetery because it's not a C3, but you can write a check to the cemetery and take a tax deduction as a donation. I mean, it's a,
Yeah.
it's a tax issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that answer your, like I said,
Yes.
what I was trying to do is, someone like Amanda, for example, or myself, I'm obviously an employee of CSA, but I spend some time during my month, during my day, on Six Oaks or on the Forest Preserve. How much of that am I actually spending on those other entities? There's a factor in there that's been in place, I think it's, 10%, or I'm making up the number off the top of my head, I don't know. There is, I was just trying to do an analysis to make sure those percentages that are in place are reasonable.
Just a further extension of understanding what the departmental expenses are. You've got these different entities, the CSA is responsible for the expenditures. We want to know what's really costing to operate these.
Right, exactly. No, yes, there's staff, but like my staff and Amanda and even Brett, we are performing the administration of these entities. So I wanted to do a better job to see really, it could be entirely that they couldn't afford it. They couldn't afford us. I mean, it could be very possible. So I just wanted to get a better, so we'll recognize where our resources are being spent. That was long, I'm sorry, Dana.
So beyond these issues we just mentioned, do you have a cost accounting system internally for everything, or just reimbursement for professional staff?
Are you referring to the related entities?
Well, no, everything. Is there cost accounting in the day-to-day operation of CSA?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, would you like to see my chart of accounts? I don't think you want to. Oh, absolutely.
Other questions?
I'll be here if you have questions afterwards. I'm happy to help.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So that completes the finance presentation. In just a moment, we'll switch it over to safety and security. So you just want to hang tight, we'll switch it over.